The old house forest, a meeting place of secrets. Time passed, and Todd, Maggie, and Dan found themselves increasingly tangled in their dreams of adventure. On that fateful evening, when they set out to explore the mysterious old house forest in Virginia, none of them suspected that this journey would mark the beginning of their worst nightmares. A chilling silence enveloped the air as the trio arrived at the forest, shrouded in a creeping fog. The conditional boundaries of reality and myth blurred in this eerie place. Legends of missing treasure seekers, ghosts, and unexplained phenomena floated through their minds. Todd pulled an old map from his pocket, a relic he had found in his grandfather's library. It was scrawled with notes about untold riches buried deep within the forest. "Is this really the right place?" Maggie asked, her voice trembling with fear. "They say people disappear here trying to find the treasure." "All myths. They're just stories to scare little kids," Dan reassured her, but he noticed his own heart racing. As they ventured deeper into the forest, they began to choose their path. Each step was laced with tension. The shadows of the trees stretched like the hands of lost souls, their shapes appearing sinister. Todd, filled with excitement, pointed at an ancient oak and raised his voice. According to the map, the treasure could be around here. The forest's atmosphere shifted with every moment. The wind whispered unnerving secrets, and their surrounding world filled with ominous sounds, cracking branches, rustling leaves, and the whispers of shadows. Suddenly, a horrible sound erupted, accompanied by a scream that echoed ominously. "Who's there?" "It's just the wind," Dan muttered, though a cold sweat had broken out on his brow. But Todd was determined. "Look, over there!" He pointed deep into the woods at a bright light. Perhaps it was one of those legendary treasures waiting for its seekers, and they couldn't resist the temptation. Having made their decision, they moved toward the mysterious light. It felt like stepping into another reality, where fear and anticipation intertwined. With every step, they delved deeper into the forest, and everything began to change. They had gone so far that the woods started to feel hostile, and the shimmering light lost its charm. When they reached a small clearing, the light vanished, leaving them enveloped in profound darkness. Maggie, unable to contain her fear, whispered, "It feels like we shouldn't have come here." Deep in the woods, a strange laughter echoed, rough and hoarse. It was laughter that reverberated through their veins with terror. "We must go back," Dan whispered, his voice regaining some resolve. Yet Todd desperately insisted, "We have to find it." They began moving deeper into the forest again, but each advancement was met by a rising dread. Soon, they realized that the forest was not a place for the living. It thrived on those who entered its confines. Finally, they stumbled upon an old cabin, eerie and abandoned. The floor creaked, and the windows were boarded up. "Maybe we can find something in here that will help us get out," Todd suggested, his voice shaky. However, upon entering, they confronted something dark and sinister that awaited them among the shadows. A colossal silhouette, resembling a human, materialized in the corner, and from the depths emerged a fragment of explicit curses. You came for something that never belonged to you." Maggie, trembling with fear, rushed to Todd, and together they began to flee. But this place was holding them captive, threatening to keep them forever. Todd noticed that shadows were closing in on them. The forest was alive with darkness and grotesque figures. When they finally fled the cabin, a hoarse whisper pursued them. "You won't leave. You won't leave." This voice engulfed them like a wave, crashing through the space. They ran again, gripped by pure panic, yet the forest did not wish for them to escape. Suddenly, a horrifying scream rang out behind them. An anguished sound, full of fear and pain, rippled through the air. It was Dan. They froze, but fear held them back from going back. The shadow had taken him into the darkness. God, how they regretted leaving him, but their terror consumed them. As they finally stumbled onto a familiar path leading them back, they found themselves in the same cursed spot where they had discovered the oak. This horrific circle, like a cursed loop, spiraled them into the abyss. When the night became complete, their suffering intensified by the dark shadows that still lurked around them. They tried to call the police, but there was no signal. The forest had completely severed their connection to the outside world. Stuck in the clearing, they heard a soft whisper, seeming to echo around them. They turned, and in the glow of their flashlights, the first ghostly face emerged. A baby, with empty eye sockets, quietly crying, pointing at the void. "Oh my God!" Maggie screamed. What a horrendous creature. How many lives had the forest claimed? They knew this was not just a forest. It was a horror, ever present amid the dark. Todd tried to calm Maggie, but as he saw the ghost raise its arms, he was reminded of Dan. He screamed, consumed by rage and fear. "We have to find him." They began moving through the forest once more, but each action bore no success. Soon they understood that the forest was not meant for the living. It survived by taking those who entered. At last, they found an old cabin, eerie and abandoned. The floor creaked and the windows were boarded. "Maybe there's something in here that can help us escape," Todd suggested, his voice trembling. Yet upon entering, they befriended something dark, patiently awaiting them among the shadows. An enormous figure loomed in the corner, and from within the depths emerged a chilling greeting. "You came for something that never belonged to you." Maggie, overwhelmed, clung to Todd, both of them frantically running, but the place was capturing them, destined to keep them forever. As they sprinted out of the cabin, the terrifying whispers enveloped them. "You will never escape. You will never escape." The shadows seemed to grow, breathing in their fear, and shadows reached for them. They collapsed to the ground, exhausted. Todd felt the weight of dread pressing down on him. "We can't stay here. We have to keep moving," he urged. Their determination carried them as they repositioned themselves in the darkness, desperately seeking a way out. Each rustle in the leaves and whisper of the wind became a reminder of the dangers lurking just beyond their sight. Maggie suddenly stopped. "Wait, did you hear that?" A faint voice echoed through the trees, a distant call that felt chillingly intimate. "Maggie, Todd." It was Dan's voice, and it sent shockwaves of dread through them. "We have to help him," she exclaimed. Against all odds, they turned around, driven by a sense of loyalty. They followed the sound of Dan's voice deeper into the woods. But soon, they found themselves caught in a vortex of confusion. The trees twisted around them, rearranging themselves like a living maze, hindering their every attempt to advance. Then, out of nowhere, a foul stench assaulted their senses. The air became thick and fetid, stinging their nostrils. From behind a gnarled tree, something moved. A monstrous entity with glistening eyes that seemed to drink in the fear emanating from Todd and Maggie. "Run!" Todd shouted, grasping Maggie's arm, and with renewed energy, they sprinted through the underbrush, branches clawing at their skin. Each frenzied breath drew them further into the heart of darkness, but the presence behind them was relentless. The screeches echoed like banshees, the rustling leaves turning into cacophony of despair. And then they saw him. Dan stood there, but he was not the friend they once knew. His features were distorted, his eyes hollow, staring vacantly into oblivion. He raised a hand towards them, beckoning for help, but despite his attempt to reach out, it was clear he was trapped in the forest's grasp. "Dan!" Maggie cried, rushing to him. But as she approached, the shadows clung tighter, and in a heart-wrenching moment, Dan began to fade, his form dissipating like mist. "Help me! Help me!" he begged, but his voice turned into an eerie echo, drowning in the whispers of the forest. "No!" Todd shouted, but it was too late. The trees closed in, swallowing Dan whole while leaving nothing but the haunting sounds of his pleas. Paralyzed, they watched the forest claim another victim. A chilling realization washed over them. The old house forest was not just a place. It was a predator, a life force that thrived on terror and despair. Desperation clawed at their hearts as they turned to flee. They had to escape this nightmare, but each step forward felt like walking deeper into a dream from which they could not awaken. Finally, they stumbled upon a narrow path leading to what seemed like a brighter area. Hope flickered in their hearts, but as they raced toward the light, the shadows behind them howled in fury, as if mourning the loss of their latest playthings. "Don't look back," Todd urged. They focused on the light, struggling to break free of the forest's grip. As they approached the exit, the night air felt almost suffocating, thick with the remnants of dread that had surrounded them. But just when they thought they had escaped, an icy wind roared through, rushing past them like a spectral hand reaching for their throats. "You cannot leave," it hissed. The ground beneath them seemed to tremble, threatening to pull them back into the abyss. As they burst forth into the open, gasping for air, they found themselves free, but forever changed. The horror they had witnessed would haunt them for the rest of their lives, a debt owed to the old house forest, a sinister specter woven into the fabric of their existence. That night, as they lay awake in their beds, the echoes of despair whispered in the dark. They dared not close their eyes, for every time they did, they knew the shadows would return, eternally reminding them that the old house forest was more than just a place. It was a living nightmare, a haunting reminder that some secrets should never be unearthed, and some places are best left undisturbed. Doll Island, Mexico, Part 1, Ghosts of the Past. On the Doll Island, lost among the ancient canals of Xochimilco, it felt as though time had stopped. The wide, hot rays of the sun couldn't chase away the shadows that enveloped the greenery and the softly rustling waters. Once, this place was home to a hermit, Julian Santana Barrera, a man with a sad and mysterious past. His life intertwined with myths and horrors, and there was no one who could tell his story without feeling a chill in their heart. According to legend, Julian found a little girl who had drowned in these murky waters, along with the doll that seemed to contain her essence. From that moment, his life took a dark turn. He began hanging dolls all over the island, each one seemingly whispering its secrets to him, plunging him deeper into a chasm of loneliness and madness. Part 2. Visitors and Fears. Over the years, the island became a magnet for tourists. Crowds chat and laugh as they walk along the muddy paths, encouraging one another with tales of brave deeds. Each brought a doll, hoping to appease the spirit of the girl they had only heard about in whispers. But as night engulfed the island, the atmosphere grew heavier. Let's meet some of those who decided to visit this strange and eerie place. Francesca, a young woman with a charming holiday smile, always sought thrilling experiences. With her were her close friends, Michael, her steadfast protector with sturdy fists, and Maria, who had been fascinated by mysticism since childhood. They planned a weekend trip to explore the island, filled with confidence that ghosts were merely figments of the imagination. At first, as they strolled the island, they felt nothing unusual, except for a slight shiver from the strong wind. The dolls they encountered seemed just to be soulless objects staring at them with their empty eyes. Yet something in the air felt strange. It was as if they were being watched by someone who had come here long before them. Part 3. The Night Evil. As darkness fell, blanketing the island, Francesca felt a chill creeping down her spine. They gathered around a campfire, exchanging scary stories. Suddenly, a loud crack shattered their peace, as if something were racing toward them. Maria poked her head out from behind a tree and froze. With her heart racing, she noticed one of the dolls moving. At first, it seemed like an illusion, but then her heartbeat quickened as she realized that the doll was indeed shifting. It couldn't just be a trick of the light. They couldn't be mistaken. "Guys, look!" she cried, pointing at the doll that swayed as if being pulled by invisible strings. The others followed her gaze, and a moment of panic gripped their souls, leaving their earlier banter behind. Michael was the first to flinch. He raised his voice, trying to joke. "It's just silly dolls, hey, don't be scared." But laughter was no longer a comfort. They saw that on some of the dolls, tattered pieces of fabric were suddenly scattered, as if someone had tried to escape. This unnerved them, stirring their imagination and deepening their fear. Part 4. The Cursed Dolls. With every step on the island, the white dolls called to them, and their inner fears became increasingly apparent. momentarily forgetting that they should be brave. Julian had departed this world, but his story remained. Each doll held memories of pain, suffering, and loss. They became witnesses of a long-standing evil curse. Each night, new screams echoed from the depths of the island. Strange noises drove them deeper through the pathways, making their heartbeats synchronize with the moonlight seeping through the trees. They soon realized that any whisper could summon something more than mere fear. It was she, the suffering girl, lost in this restless world. Part 5. An awful choice. The choice was simple yet horrifying. Stay and become part of this dreadful story, or leave the island and abandon the dolls to their fate. Was it worth sacrificing themselves for the sake of banishing the haunting? One night, as the moon rose high, Francesca found herself awakening with dreams full of the dolls' grotesque faces. Using bold words, she reproached her friends for their loss of spirit, for their awareness. Something within her clicked, as if the darkness itself had touched her. The moment they prepared to leave the island, they felt invisible chains binding them. The hermit Julian was watching them. He didn't want them to leave. He posed a question that would stop them in their tracks, making them confront their fears. Why have you come here, if you do not seek the truth? Soon, they understood. There was more to these dolls than they could imagine. They were souls trapped, bound to these lands. Every doll held a story of agony, and they were now witnesses to years of torment. Part 6. The haunting choice. The choice loomed over them, growing heavier. Surrender to the darkness that threatened to swallow them whole, or confront their deepest fears. Summoning all their courage, they attempted to escape this cursed place. However, with each movement, their actions resonated deep in the heart of the island, and they felt the rising wails of the dolls. The cries grew louder and louder until they engulfed them. Blinded by the noise, they found themselves suffocating under the weight of their fears and regrets. They knew that this was only the beginning. On this island, the dolls were watching every step they took, and every farewell scream was lost in oblivion. Part 7. The finale. Through the unbearable sound, they seemed to hear the whispers of the girl herself. Speak, or stay forever. Only when they dared to call upon their inner selves did they feel light breaking through the dark. They left the island, but the dolls remained, and no one knows how many more lives they will consume. Now, as night falls, and tourists gather once more at this ominous island, they remain unaware that each step could be their last. Epilogue. Have you ever wondered how many stories are hidden in the dark? On Doll Island, legends await their time. Every new doll brought to these lands sharpens its eerie secret. At any moment, screams may arise, and perhaps your own footsteps could become the final ones. Walk by, but remember this. Sometimes stories don't end. They merely continue to live among us.